Welcome, everyone, to the third webinar in our series of how parents can support their kids with caring for their bodies, understanding privacy, setting boundaries, and creating healthy relationships and maintaining safety of their bodies. Today's webinar, we are going to be talking about boundaries and consent. So a really important topic and maybe a little bit more of a difficult topic for some of our kiddos. But I think this is going to be a really exciting webinar with a lot of great information. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Allison Wiest. I am a trainer with Maine Family Federation, providing trainings to families and professional and young people across our states. I'm also a parent to a 13-year-old boy with a disability as well. And I'm joined by Lynette Johnson. Lynette, would you like to introduce yourself today?
Yes, I'm the director of the education programs at Maine Family Planning. We provide a lot of curriculum resources to educators that they can use in schools. We provide resources for parents around all kinds of sexual health topics for young people of all ages. And we also, as an agency, operate 18 clinics around the state that offer sexual and reproductive health services.
Thanks, Lynette. So as I mentioned, if you've been with us prior, we already recorded the introduction and stages to sexual development. We have gone over puberty and changing bodies. And so today we're on understanding boundaries and consent. Hopefully, if you've seen the last two videos, they have been helpful. So let's dive in. Again, the purpose of our trainings, you may have heard this in the other trainings, but we know that our children with different abilities have unique needs, and again, related to sexual and reproductive health. So we saw the need for this type of a training. It's really to provide resources and information and empower parents to be able to support your children. And then it's also an opportunity to brainstorm supports with each other. We have done this training live, but we saw the need and heard the need for a recorded version. So webinar 3, understanding boundaries and consent. Today we're going to talk about how we can help our kids create boundaries for themselves. So again, really important that we set boundaries for ourselves, what we're comfortable with, and that's going to be different for each person. Understanding what consent is, which can be, kind of a difficult concept, but really important, especially, in our world and in our attempts to keep our kids safe, knowing that we need to ask for consent and respect other people's boundaries and consent. And then, again, just how do we keep, ourselves safe? How do we keep our kids safe? So again, just a thought-provoking question as we dive in, thinking about what skills you can think of that your child would need to be safe and understand boundaries and consent. So just something to be thinking about as we're going through the training today. So boundaries and personal space, again, the more our kids understand and the more prepared they are, if a situation arises, they will be equipped to handle it. So again, I think, as we're teaching about personal space and boundaries, using very simple, basic language and role playing. I think role playing is has a huge benefit in this as we're trying to teach our children about boundaries in personal space, that we really provide those opportunities to have those teachable moments and to role play certain scenarios. And we have some scenarios at the end that can help you walk through this. But, again, teaching what our own personal space is. We all, as individuals, have personal space. And for one person, it might be, for me, it might be okay if someone is in close proximity to me or touching me. That might feel okay to me, but that might not feel okay to somebody else. So again, having those opportunities to talk about like what feels comfortable to you. Is it comfortable for someone to be, within 5 feet of you? Or, again, just having those conversations And again, knowing that everybody's personal space is going to be a little bit different. Practicing is really, again, key. And we do have some scenarios to be able to sort of practice some of those, some of those scenarios that might come up. So a boundary, a definition of a boundary is a line that others cannot cross without your permission. And again, I think for our kiddos, like it might be helpful to actually, create, either do a drawing or maybe you put some tape on the floor or something on the floor or around your young person to really help them understand what a boundary is. You can actually see this like personal line, but again, this is your personal boundary. This is what a boundary is, and other people cannot cross it without your permission. It's also something, a boundary is a limit placed on something, like a rule to follow. So again, there we have some scenarios later on, but again, our kids, a lot of them I think do understand rules. There are certain rules when we're at home or when we're at school or when we're out in the community. And again, we have to abide by those rules and follow those rules and respect those rules. Boundaries cannot and should not be disrespected or ignored. So again, when someone else sets a boundary for us, that we, again, we need to respect that, respect what the other person is telling us. That we can't just ignore a boundary. We might want to, give somebody a hug because they're a really good friend of ours, and we, are excited to see them, but maybe they're not comfortable with that hug, or maybe they're not even in the mood for a hug today. So again, if they're telling us no, that we're really respecting that. And again, just reminding our kiddos that it's okay to have boundaries and need personal space. I think, again, just thinking about my current situation with my 13-year-old son, we're going through some challenges where, there are some more rules being placed and he might not like what those rules are. And so he's having some big feelings around them. And he's starting to say like he wants some space or he doesn't want to talk anymore. And again, for me, I need to respect, like right now, he needs a little personal space and we can come back to this and talk about it or whatever. So everybody sort of has their personal boundaries and need for space, and we really do need to honor that. And then again, we have an example here, which I think is an example that I can relate to as well, just with my son. But around the holidays, especially, we might have, relatives or family friends that come that we don't see on a regular basis, and they want a hug from our child. And our child might not feel comfortable with that. Either they're not a hugger, or maybe they don't know this person very well. And it is okay for them to say, again, politely or kindly, I don't really want to hug right now, or I don't feel like hugging right now, maybe next time, or something like that. And that, again, that we're honoring what they're saying. So, and then I also put down here, and we'll talk a little bit more about it throughout the slides, but really developing a self-advocacy plan, so that our young people can, tell others what they need, what they want, and what they don't want. So how can we begin to instill the self-advocacy skills, speaking up for yourself and saying, this is what I need, this is what I don't like, this is what I do like. Again, will better equip them as they get older and are faced with certain situations. So again, when we're trying to sort of, teach this skill, like what is a boundary? We just provided, sort of a physical boundary example here, being the teacher's, staff lounge or something like that at school. So again, this is, a boundary that it's a teacher's staff room, lounge, whatever you want to call it. So who goes in there? Only the teachers and the staff at the school. Who is not allowed into the staff room? It would be the students, right? So that's, again, the boundary, the rule, within that school. And again, it needs to be respected, right? So again, this is just sort of a physical example that I think might be, again, helpful for kids when they're trying to understand this concept. But again, this is a physical boundary. And so when we're thinking about personal boundaries, that's a little bit different and it might be a little bit harder to understand because again, it is going to change or vary from person to person. Um, and again, a personal boundary being, it's the boundary that we set for ourselves, what we're comfortable with or we're not comfortable with. So again, that's going to be different. And I think when you're, the other person that, might want to, you know, across a boundary, right? That you're paying attention to because sometimes we have the language or we're able to communicate that, we don't like this or we don't want this, but not everybody is able to communicate as well as others. So I think when you're the other person that might want to cross somebody's boundary or you don't understand what somebody's boundary is, that number one, you're checking in and you're asking, but that you're also paying attention to body language or facial expressions and things like that. Um, so again, when we're thinking about personal boundaries, we're thinking about, as I mentioned, like physical contact, right? Being touched, whether that's being touched on the arm or a hug or whatever that might look like. But it's also just sort of your own, the personal space that you need around yourself when you're in a crowded space. This is a big one for my son in particular. He does not do well in crowded spaces. He doesn't like other people too close to him. And so, and again, that's perfectly fine, but it's equipping him with the skills to be able to say, like, okay, this is my personal space. Can you move back a little bit? And again, it's okay to communicate that as long as we're communicating in a way, that isn't hurtful to others. Another personal boundary for some people might be, certain language like cursing, and then sharing personal items. Just because I might, share a sweatshirt with a friend who's cold, that might not feel comfortable to somebody else. So again, personal boundaries vary from person to person, but making sure that we are respecting each other's personal boundaries is really important. So some key points as we are, as we're talking with our young person and teaching them about this is really like my body belongs to me. Um, you're the boss of your body. You're in charge of your body. Helping them understand what feels. And I think this can be tricky is that, checking in with yourself about like what feels comfortable and what doesn't feel comfortable. I think about this with both my kids because I have a daughter who's neurotypical, and then I have my son who, has autism. And so, you know, with my daughter, I always said, like, oh, listen to your intuitions. And if something doesn't feel good to you, that's a red flag. And, all of those types of things where for my son, that's a little bit more challenging. But I think, again, we need to continue to have these conversations, practice asking them how they're feeling, provide them with scenarios and ask them how they feel about that. Does this feel comfortable to you? Does this not feel comfortable to you? It might mean that like your stomach feels funny or, you feel uncomfortable. Maybe your body feels fidgety or something in a certain scenario or something like that. So again, giving them some language and helping them sort of understand some of that. But just knowing that like your body is yours, you can say, um, you know, no, I don't like that. It's perfectly okay to say no. Nobody should ever have to feel like they have to go along with something that they're not comfortable with. Um, Again, we can say it in a way that's like, no, I don't, I don't like this or I don't want this. They could walk away in a situation where they're really not comfortable and they don't have the language. It is okay to walk away from uncomfortable situation. And I think the other really important point too is that you can change your mind. Like just because you said yes to something, you agreed to something, or you let somebody, into your personal space, or you let them cross a boundary. Once they've done that, if that starts to feel uncomfortable, you can change your mind and be like, okay, no, I thought I was okay with this, but I'm not okay with this, and I've changed my mind, and then you can say no. Speaking up for yourself, letting others know what you like and what you don't like is really important. People don't know unless we tell them, which again can be, a little harder for our young people who might not have the communication understand social cues, like all of these types of things that you need to do to be able to advocate for yourself. But again, I think as parents, we need to continue to support our kids and to give them the language and to develop, like I said, a self-advocacy plan and those types of things. Letting them know that it is okay to use your voice and ask for what you need or what you don't need or want. So um, it's important to respect when someone tells you no. Again, we might not like the answer that we hear from somebody, but we have to accept it and we have to respect their boundaries as well. And so, again, I think, it's not always the answer we might not, it's an answer we might not want to hear because we're super excited to see our friend and we really want to give them a hug. But, again, they might not be comfortable with and we have to respect them for that. Um, and again, practicing how to recognize when someone is not comfortable. I was kind of chatting about that in a little bit. Sorry, I don't know what to do. Sorry about that, everyone. I had a little emergency I had to take care of. Um, but again, just sort of going back to what I was talking about, that recognizing when someone is not comfortable is, can be a challenging concept. But again, teaching our kids to pay attention to facial expressions that someone has. If they're making a facial expression that looks like they're uncomfortable or not happy about something, what is their body language? Are they moving backwards? Things like that. So I think helping our kids and practicing those maybe in a role play exercise is a great way to do that. And then again, practice asking someone else what they want or what they're comfortable with. So again, just providing those opportunities, whether they're are authentic sort of opportunities that arise in your daily life, or whether you're providing some scenarios to practice it. I think it's really key and really important. So before we dive into the next slide, Lynette, did you have anything that you wanted to share about any of that?
I think one thing that came up for me is the importance of letting other people in your child's life know what their boundaries are might be very helpful. I think there's some people who don't understand, especially if it's a loved one or a grandparent, maybe. I don't know why I'm picking on grandparents, but someone who would like to have receive a hug from a family member and, maybe letting them know that we're working on consent, we're working on boundaries. So it's really important if you help support this, and it's okay for them not to give a hug. And maybe you as the other adult can help find ways for them to express, affection with you without making it be the kind of expectation you have, like a hug. Um, so it might be that your child would love to wave or give a high five, and that's really comfortable for them. Try to get the other adults on board, and explain that to them, and hopefully they'll understand. Which it's also true for like healthcare providers. If you could let your healthcare provider know that your child is particularly anxious about something or doesn't like touch around certain spots, I find that healthcare providers are getting a little bit better at saying, I'm going to do this. Is it okay if I touch this? But not all of them do that. And if you find that it's really important for healthcare providers or other caregivers to understand that, we need to work on the people around our children and not just put all the, responsibility on our kids. I think that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other thing too that just rose up for me that I was going to mention too is, again, in our own homes, as parents sort of role modeling, I think about this because I'm a single parent, and so it's just me and my son in the home. And so I think, as a young boy, he would go to the bathroom and not always shut the door and things like that. And so again, when he was, 4 or 5 years old, that wasn't a big deal. But again, some of those physical boundaries, we shut the door when we're in there, and practicing that and making sure that your child is doing that and role modeling that and all of that is also another really important thing that we can do for a young person.
So I'll start with the consent conversation. And Allison can jump in at any time. But consent goes along very well with boundaries because understanding consent, what it means, and your right to say yes or no, give consent or not, really goes hand in hand with respecting boundaries. Consent is kind of a big word, so we'll go through a lot of different ways that people can express it without necessarily requiring everyone to understand all the different, aspects of consent. So everyone is different with boundaries. You have the right to say no. It helps if, and other people have the right to say no or yes. Um, So that's something that works both ways, and that's something that we need to teach our kids to understand that it's not only about you being able to say no, but understanding when somebody else doesn't want to do something. And again, it can be something as intimate as like a little hug and a physical touch, but it can also be like, no, I don't like, this is my favorite stuffed animal, and I don't really like other people playing with it, and that's okay. That's like, no, it's not, I'm not going to let you borrow it, or you can't just take something from me. Or I can't just take something from somebody else with asking, hey, that's a cool toy. Can I touch it? Can I play with it? That they understand it works both ways. Body language is important. We talked about body language, or Allison just mentioned it quickly. It's hard to understand body language sometimes. Going with your gut doesn't work for all people because we don't all have that sense of what feels okay or not. So the more examples you can give, the better. Maybe someone can't express themselves very well. Either they're maybe nonverbal, or they just feel like they can't communicate when they're in a situation, a social situation. It's really hard for them to talk. So like finding other, helping them figure out like this, people are going to understand when you put your hands up, and then if your child is using more body language that you might be practicing in the home for them to be able to tell you, no, I don't like that. Yes, that's okay. Maybe share that with the people in their lives so they also understand what that means. If it's a thumbs up, or, sometimes it's really obvious and sometimes it's not obvious what those body languages are. So if you can point out, if you're watching something, if you're, engaging with people and you see someone kind of backing up and you can tell that they're not really, that, wanting to be part of the conversation or part of the activity, you might point it out to your child and say, "Oh, did you notice how when they didn't like that, they stepped away, or they put up their hands, or they turned away, or they crossed their hands over their, you know, in front of them." Try to point those things out so maybe they can understand what body language might mean. So if you're unsure, that's another thing to teach a young person. If you're not sure if someone's agreeing or not, then that means they're not agreeing. It's like you really need to get a affirmative yes or no. Especially affirmative yes, like yes, I want to do that. That sounds great. That would be fun. Don't just assume because they kind of look like they're interested, or you wish they were really interested in doing what you wanted to do, that you're kind of putting that on them. Oh, they must want to do this because they didn't say no. So, but if there is, you know, if it doesn't look like they want to do it, then that means they're not consenting. So asking, listening, respecting, those are some key points to go over with your kids. Um, Asking, make sure you're listening. And this isn't just kids. I mean, sometimes we make assumptions too because we want to hear a certain response to something that we want to do or get someone to agree with. So sometimes we're not really listening to what they're saying. If they're saying, well, I guess that'd be okay if you really want to. I mean, does that sound like like they are interested? But sometimes I'm like, well, they said yes. They said they wanted to. I think that we sometimes project, or your child might kind of project on other, their friends or something. But listening to really like, are they saying that they're interested, or are they just going along because they think they need to, or they want to please you? So it's a complicated social interaction that everybody has difficulty with. But if young people are having a little more trouble understanding body language, or, those kinds of signs that other people might pick up on, then we have to just do a little bit more work with it. And then it's okay to say, I know that hurt your feelings, that they didn't want to share their toy. I know that hurt that you probably didn't feel good when they said no, they didn't want to go with you to the movie. But that's their right, just like you can say no to something, they also have the right to say no if they don't want to do something. And then help them try to figure out, like, maybe you want to propose something else that they could do together. So it does hurt to get kind of rejected, and people might feel rejected in that situation. So just talking it over with your kids afterwards is really helpful. Um, So communicating what you want, what you don't want, what are some situations? I mean, you might find it's interacting with their peers, but it also might be um, like hygiene practices. They don't want to do something, or telling them like, this is why we need to clean this part of your body. And like if you're in the care of other people who are also helping you try to figure these things out, make sure you communicate that and ask that they ask consent just to make sure that um, people feel like they're empowered to say no, or if they're not feeling comfortable. Sharing stuff, we talked about that, but other things, not just physical things, but maybe somewhere to ask you, so where do you live? And there might be things that you don't want to share. What's your favorite, whatever. And, I think it's okay that we also have boundaries around our personal information or our feelings, and it's okay to be like, I'm not going to share that information because I don't know you that well, or it's really personal for me, and it's something that's inside of me that I want to keep, and I don't necessarily want to share how, do I like this other person or not? Like, oh, do you like so and so? It's like, I don't really want to share that right now. So there's boundaries also around personal information and what you might share or not share. And I love that earlier you said, Allison, that we always have the opportunity to change our minds. So yeah, that was fun. We did that last week. We played. You wanted to do this. I agreed. We did it. We had this, we played this game. Actually, I didn't really like that game, so I know I said yes last time, but I really would rather do something else this time. So I think changing their mind, it just, it really is empowering to know that if it doesn't feel right, or if you decided it wasn't as fun as you thought it was going to be, it's okay to say no. Or yes, you can share that, but you can't take it home with you. Like, I don't mind that we're playing right now. You're using my iPad or we're doing something, but you do need to give that back. So there might be parameters on, you know, sharing and on your own terms. I love that picture. And then because you can go ahead. So I would practice as much as you can words. Like, what does consent sound like? What does it mean to agree? Sure, sounds good. Yeah, please, thumbs up, And so language is very unique to different people. So help your child find things that are okay with them. Cut it out. I'm not interested. Quit it. And if they hear that from somebody else, you know, don't do that. I'm not interested. Those are other ways of saying no. So try to practice in different situations, like different ways to say no, or ask your child, like, what works for you? What do you think sounds best when someone that you really like a grandparent, is asking you to do something and you don't want to just shout no at them? Or some kids might be really comfortable with that, but some of them might feel uncomfortable. So try to help them find words that are going to help them express how they feel. And then when we were doing this in the live, we had people share words and other situations. Um, Great. So safe touch and unsafe touch. How do we help our young people understand what's safe and appropriate, what's not safe and inappropriate? It might be okay to give someone who's a family member a hug. If someone else asks for a hug that you don't know very well at all, or maybe you go somewhere and they want a hug, you're like, oh, I don't really know you. So what's appropriate and in what situations? Of course, we really want to help our young people stay safe from abuse, and so we also want to make sure they understand what parts of their body no one should ever ask them to show those parts of their body. And then you have to also say there might be times when a caregiver needs to help you bathe, or so you really have to kind of give all those different examples of when it's okay and when it's not okay. Keeping secrets and things like that, understanding what the difference is between a secret that is like a more of a surprise, like, oh, this is going to be we don't want to tell the person because we're going to surprise them for their birthday, and we don't want to tell them what we're going to give them as a present. To like someone asking you to keep a secret about something that is harmful. So, um, if you have a feelings chart, any kind of visuals would be useful. And then role playing situations. It's okay that maybe sometime they gave someone their information, like someone asked them, "So where do you live?" And they told the person. This happened to my son way back when he was playing video games, and someone online asked where he lived, and he said the town he lived in, and then he like got horrified, and then he didn't want to share it, because he thought like I did something wrong and I don't want to get in trouble. So having those conversations all the time about sharing information and people asking for information, and they can always come to you if you've told them like don't share that information with a stranger, and then it might be someone that actually needs the information so they can, send them something, that just explain the difference between when it's safe and when it's not safe. I think that's it for that.
This is me
Okay,
now.
great. Did you have anything you wanted to add about kind of consent? I mean, it's not always that easy. So
It's not always that easy, no. And again, I think again when when communication is limited or challenging, and those social cues and just all of that, because I know even, my son sometimes he thinks when he hears somebody say things like cut that out or whatever, he thinks it's kind of funny. So, again, really, I think providing the opportunities to share the information and to give real examples, real scenarios, and walking through them, and knowing too that again the conversations are not a one and done, like it's ongoing, it's constant, training and information and all of those things for in order to understand the concept because it is complicated. So
I was just gonna say, I can imagine someone like being tickled or something and laughing and then saying cut that out. So it can be confusing, right? So usually if I cut that out, like, okay, maybe I'm going to stop and check in with that person, even though they're laughing or they don't seem like they're bothered. But if they say cut it out, that's a good time to stop and check in.
yes. So how do we keep our kids safe? Again, some things to think about. We've been talking, in pretty good detail about, providing the information that they need to keep them safe and having those ongoing conversations, providing the scenarios and walking them through, what language they can use, what they can do in certain scenarios and situations. We know that our kids are more vulnerable. To be taken advantage of, quite honestly. So again, it really is important to equip them with, the words and the actions that they will need if a situation comes up that they need to deal with. Having those family rules and communicating those to your children. Again, I was kind of talking about like, having the door closed and things like that, when you're using the bathroom or even in your bedroom or certain things like that. So, again, I think having, boundaries in your home, having family rules, practicing, asking for consent, in certain situations. I mean, again, I don't typically ask my son for a hug, but again, if I'm trying to practice it, I mean, it could be an opportunity to just practice asking consent. Um, Creating a safe space for asking questions, I think is important for all kids that, there are going to be, questions that come up, or they may say something that, you're like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? But making sure that we have a safe space for them to come to, that they know that they can come to us as parents, that we're not going to, make them feel bad for asking a question or saying something to us, sharing something with us, that we're not shaming them, that we're open to what they have to say. And again, that we're providing them with, um, the support or, the validation or the information that they need, and answering the questions that they need the answers to. Lynette talked a little bit about this, but not keeping secrets. Again, like what is and again, Lynette did a nice job of, what is a safe secret? A safe secret might be like, okay, again, there's a birthday party coming up. We don't want to spoil it. But otherwise, like keeping secrets can be, I mean, I hate to use the word dangerous, but it can be a little bit dangerous. We know that, unsafe things can happen even within close circles and families and things like that. So I think keeping secrets, can be a little bit dangerous. But again, I think explaining like the difference between what is a safe secret, Johnny's birthday party is coming up and, we don't want to spoil it for him or we don't want him to know what we bought him versus like what's an unsafe secret that we wouldn't want to keep. And then also knowing like who our trusted adults are, like, that we can go to. We kind of talked about that, like having that safe space, but it might be mom and dad, but there also, might be some other trusted adults, within your circle that your young person can go to and talk to and is comfortable with. I already said practicing role modeling, using resources, books, and social stories. We have a lot of resources at the end of this webinar as well as our entire series. So there's a lot of great resources for books, using social stories. There's videos online that can really help support you as you're going through this with your child. And then again, creating really a self-advocacy plan, giving them the language that they need to ask for what they need, giving them language when they need to, say no or create personal boundaries, and then also having a safety plan. And I think that's coming up in the next slide here, and maybe in the next couple slides. So identifying trusted adults can actually be a fun and engaging activity to do with your child. And I think it is important to engage them in it, right? Because just because as parents we think somebody is a trusted or safe adult doesn't necessarily mean that our child feels that way, right? So checking in with them. But so really working together to create that list of who, they feel the trusted adults are. And then, how do they contact them? Making sure they understand how to contact this person, how to talk to this person. And again, the list might include, some of these that we have listed, but obviously this is not a comprehensive list by any means. Making sure your child's comfortable, right? I said that with the people that are on the list because again, it's their safety circle. Have your child think about the people in their life that cares about them and has their best interests at heart. So again, really having them go through this activity, and they're really thinking about the people that, love them and care about them and help them and all of those types of things. And this can be the start, again, of a more detailed self-advocacy and safety plan, identifying who those trusted adults are that they can go to, if, when they need that support or when they're feeling uncomfortable or when a situation arises. And again, I mentioned this already, but just remembering that unsafe things can happen even in trusted circles. And so, again, going back to, not only our young person trusting their instincts or guts, but us as parents too, that we're, vigilant and we're paying attention and that we're also, trusting our instincts as well and paying attention, to maybe different behaviors or how our child is acting around a particular adult or individual in their lives. So again, this is not elaborate by any means, but again, just, to give you something to think about. Like again, it can be as basic as, creating a circle on a piece of paper, and writing down, who the who the safe people are within the circle. So inside the circle are the safe people, your trusted, people that you're comfortable with. And then on the outside of the circle, these are the people that maybe they're adults that we know, but they're not like a trusted, safe adult that we would, share personal information with or, anything like that. So again, just a nice exercise to do together with your child. Again, sort of a safety plan. If a situation, arises, I think it's never something that we want to talk about or want to worry about or want our kids to worry about. But again, we also don't want them to be in a situation and not know what to do. So, making sure they know how to stay safe. So again, tell the person to stop, or put your hand up or, whatever you need to do to let the person know that you want them to stop doing whatever they're doing. Getting away. So removing yourself, again, depending on the severity of the situation, that actually might mean, walking or running away or whatever that looks like. And then finding an adult, again, in a situation, depending on the severity of it, there may be, time, if it's not serious in nature, finding that trusted adult that you can talk to, or if it's in a serious situation, that find, a close professional or adult or somebody in a position of sort of what's the word I'm trying to come up with? Whether that's a teacher or a police officer or somebody that's nearby that can help them. And then explain what happened. So again, to the best of their ability, telling what happened. And then again, if you're the adult that is receiving this information, again, letting the child know that they did the right thing, that by telling somebody that was the right thing to do. And then certainly kids should know like how to call 911. Because again, we live in a world that there's a lot of scary things that happen. So making sure that our kids are safe and know how to contact somebody to help them is important. And then reminding our kids that it's never too late to tell somebody. So even though something might have happened, a week ago or months ago or something like that, if it's something that felt unsafe to them or somebody harmed them, whether that's physically or emotionally or whatever, that it's never too late to talk to one of those trusted people in their lives. Um,
Before
right,
we
I'm
went
turning it back to you.
Before we go into social media and internet safety, I was thinking about how it used to be stranger danger. Like, so we tell our kids if you don't know them, they're a stranger and they could be dangerous. Where sometimes you're going to have to work with your child to be like, if you got lost in the store right now or something happened, like it's going to be full of strangers and some like like who could you go to? Who might you like? So a person wearing a uniform from the store person, like someone who works there. Like I always would tell my kids, like, find another a parent with a child like so anyway, just like in those kinds of situations they might be full of strangers, people they don't know, their trusted adults aren't there, but what could they do? Or if someone was telling them, come with me, little kid, like they could sit on the ground and say no really loud and get
Right,
attention. If they're
right.
feeling uncomfortable, like it's okay to yell at someone and sit down and I'm not going with you, or like
Mhm,
that sort of
mhm.
thing. So I think in different situations it's good to like kind of go through those role plays with your kid.
Absolutely.
So social media, internet safety, wow, talk about one place that there's a lot of dangers these days. And oftentimes our kids are a little bit more advanced in knowing how to navigate the internet. And we're like, what? What's that? What game are you playing? Or who are you talking to? Oh, it just feels like they're so much farther ahead of us. So here's just a bunch of stuff, there's social media, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, the gaming, sometimes they can connect with other people, and it can be a really great thing. If they don't have friends around them that like the same kind of games, they can connect. They might not know the people, but that's why we need to be really careful of like setting boundaries, knowing what our kids are doing online, letting them know, not everybody, if you can't see the person, you don't really know if it's who they say they are. And here's some warning signs, if they start asking you personal questions or, how can you tell if, always seek, go tell your parents. There's no shame in that. If someone starts to give you, you know, information that, or give you information to ask you for things like, oh, could you send me a picture? Like try to go through all those scenarios and try to figure out like how they can be advocate for themselves when they're online. Just keeping an eye on what they're accessing, what apps they have, what social media things they have. Yeah, these are all great. These little arrows are what are establishing rules, um, limit their time, asking them, so what did you do, or why was that game fun, or tell me more about that. And just who are your friends online? All of these things are really important. There's also a lot of online porn that kids can easily access these days. Even with some parent controls, some kids can get around it, or something gets through, or they accidentally type a Google question about something and something appears. So letting them know that there are things out there for adults only, and if it seems like they see something, they should just tell you, and it's not their fault. Right, it's not your fault. That's really important because a lot of young people just feel like they did something wrong and they're going to get in trouble from the people who love them. And when we want them to know that it's really important for you to tell me if something doesn't seem right. Podcasts, there's a lot of things that people are listening to these days, and I'm thinking mostly like teenagers or young adults that are really bad information that they're getting. And so, keeping an eye on, kind of information. Might seem like news, but it's not really news. It's just information or selling certain products or getting them to do things that we don't want them to do. Common Sense Media is an amazing website. On Common Sense Media, you can like put in the name of a movie. Let's say like, oh, so and so wants me to come over and we want to watch this movie, or I watched this movie. If you want to like, what was that movie about? And they saw it at somebody else's house. You just want to know, is that an appropriate movie? It sounds a little sketchy. You can find out, and it will tell you like the appropriateness for what age and some things like, is there violence? Is there bad language? Is there sexual situations? It will give you all that information. And that's true for some of the other things they might do online, games that they're playing, um, social media, the TikToks and all those things, Discord, like what are those things? Because they know about it quicker than we do. So you can go to Common Sense Media and like look it up, and they'll kind of give you a lowdown on what it is. That could be a webinar all to itself, the
Yeah, right.
online stuff.
Uh, so we did provide some scenarios. Again, we can't stress enough how important it is to practice consent and boundaries. And I think again, using, your day-to-day, scenarios that might come up is a nice way to start. Here we have a variety of scenarios. Some are, an everyday type of thing. A classmate reaches for Johnny's arm to help him get up after he trips and falls. But then we have some other, more serious scenarios that will be good to, talk to your child about. Emily and her uncle spent the weekend together doing fun things. He buys her presents, takes her shopping, but then later, when they're alone, he asks her to touch his penis. So again, some of these are a little bit heavier and some of them, are just sort of day to day. But again, as we mentioned, it's good to equip our kids with the language and the information that they need and how they can, get out of these scenarios. So I encourage you to, to go through these with your child.
The Children's Advocacy Center, there's just a great resource if you do have an incident to report. And the reason that I highly recommend reaching out to one of these that in your local community or the nearest one in your community to your community is that they know how to really protect kids. Like sometimes if a child says something, they might get a lot of questions if someone's not trained in how to work with a young person that might report an incident that's abusive or a sexual assault or something that you really want to have people that are going to protect your child and not um, further traumatize them by asking too many questions and making them repeat information. So anyway, I just really highly recommend the Children's Advocacy Centers if there is an incident or if you're concerned about something and you want to check in about what you should do. Of course, you might have other resources around you that are also wonderful, but I just wanted to put a slide up for that. Mikasa is a great organization. They helped to create the Children's Safety Partnership, and this is also a website where you could go online to find out about Maine laws, how to talk to your children, how to, talk to other adults around so they understand what's appropriate, what's not, what they could do if in situations of, some kind of abuse or exploitation. Um, the we will share these slides so that people can actually click. You'll be able to click on those links and get the information. The sexual health behavior changes, it's a really great table that just talks about different um, behaviors and why a young person might do that and what you can do. And there's videos that are attached to it. So that's a great resource. The ARC is an organization, I think it's in Pennsylvania or maybe, yeah, so it's not in Maine, but it's Achieve with Us, and it's a great website, and they have a lot of great resources. I mentioned Common Sense Media, and then there's also grab a bunch of books, and like you can teach a lot of lessons and also entertain your kids and get them into a story and point out like, oh, isn't that interesting how she did this when someone crossed her boundaries? So books are always a great way to help kids learn. And that's it. That's all we had for this particular very heavy and involved and complicated topic.
Mhm. So thanks everyone for being here and check us out on the next webinar.
Thanks for joining.
Bye bye.